When a police officer comes face to face with a young person on the street, it is rarely ever a simple matter of right and wrong. It's this incredibly complex moment, right? It's filled with legal rules, human factors, and a single critical decision that can literally change a life forever. So today, we're diving right into that intersection, the place where law, discretion, and the really challenging world of juvenile policing all collide.
And that question, man, it cuts right to the heart of how high the stakes can get. Back in 2006, a 7-year-old girl named Tijani Glee was shot in the face just for riding her bike. Police figured it was a stray bullet from a gang shooting, and they even arrested a couple of suspects. But then, the whole investigation just hit a brick wall. The only eyewitness suddenly changed his story, and a total wall of silence just went up. A wall built on pure fear. That quote, from a neighbor who wouldn't give their name, shows you the kind of pressure that can surround these cases.
And that, right there, is the heart of it all. See, policing kids isn't just about what the law books say. It's about those split-second decisions an officer has to make on the street. It's about that one judgment call that can set the course for a young person's entire future. To really get it, you have to understand both sides of that coin, the law and the human judgment.
Okay, so before we can really dig into that judgment call, we've got to understand the rule book they're playing by. Let's take a look at the legal framework police have to operate in when they're dealing with minors. First off, just pay attention to the words. For adults, we say arrest, but for kids, the legal term is taking into custody. Now that might sound like a small thing, but it's not. It's all based on this legal idea called in loco parentis, which basically means in place of the parent. The whole idea is that the state is supposed to be stepping in to protect the child, not just to punish them.
So what's the bar for an officer to actually take a kid into custody? Well, it's the exact same standard as for an adult, probable cause. And that's a really important legal line to draw. It's got to be more than just a gut feeling or a hunch, but it doesn't have to be 100% certainty. It's that reasonable belief that, yeah, a crime happened here, and this person is the one who did it.
All right, so the kid's in custody. The officer wants to start asking questions. Now what? What are the rules of the road here? What rights does that young person have to protect them during an interrogation?
And that leads us straight to probably the most famous legal script in the world, the Miranda warning. Thanks to a huge Supreme Court case called In Re Galt, all these rights you hear on TV, they fully apply to kids too. The right to stay quiet, the warning that anything they say can be used against them, and of course, the big one, the right to a lawyer.
But, and this is a huge but, can a kid, say a 10-year-old, truly get what it means to waive those rights? To figure that out, the courts don't just take a simple yes or no. They have to look at what's called the totality of the circumstances. That means they look at everything, the kid's age, their education, if they even understand the charges, and even how the police conducted the interrogation. It's a judgment call for the court, not just a simple checkbox.
Okay, so we've got the laws on the books, but now let's get to the other half of the story, the officer's discretion. This is where the law on the page meets the reality on the street. This is where that judgment call really happens. And this is what that discretion looks like on the ground. Just check out these numbers. So yeah, most juvenile cases, about 62% get sent to juvenile court. But look at that next slice. 28% are handled informally, and the kid is just released. Think about that. More than 1 in 4 times, an officer is making a call to keep a kid out of the formal system entirely. That's discretion in action. So what's going through that officer's head? What makes them lean one way or the other? Well, it's a whole mix of things. Obviously, how serious the crime is plays a huge part. But so does the kid's attitude, their prior record, even things like whether the officer thinks the parents are willing to step up and help. All of this is getting weighed in a matter of minutes.
And this, of course, leads to the big, tough question. When you give individual officers so much power to make these judgment calls, does it open the door for bias, whether it's conscious or not, to sneak into the system?
I want you to just look at this number for a second. 71%. In the world of juvenile justice, what on earth could that represent? Just let that sink in for a moment.
Okay, here's what that is. In 2014, 71% of all young people arrested for robbery were African American. That points to a massive and, frankly, troubling disproportionality within the justice system.
And look, it wasn't just robbery. This data from the same year shows that for a lot of very serious crimes, the arrest rates for African American youth are way out of proportion to their percentage of the population. Now, statistics like these are at the center of a really fierce debate.
Some researchers see this and say it's clear evidence of systemic bias in policing. Others argue it reflects really complex issues like socioeconomic factors and different offending rates. Either way, understanding this data is the first step.
You know, that judgment call isn't just about one cop on one street corner. It's bigger than that. It's shaped by the entire department's strategy. So let's zoom out a bit, away from the individual officer, and look at how police departments as a whole are trying to handle juvenile crime. I mean, policing has changed so much over the years. We're talking about a journey from these informal watch systems way back in the 13th century to the first real organized police forces, then to specialized units like delinquency control squads, and finally to the modern idea of community policing, which is all about partnering with citizens to prevent crime in the first place. One of the biggest shifts in modern policing is this idea of problem-oriented policing. Basically, instead of just racing from one 911 call to the next, it's about being proactive. It's about taking a step back and asking, hey, why do all these burglaries keep happening in this one neighborhood? It's about finding the root cause, instead of just treating the symptom. And the playbook they use for this is a simple four-step model called SARA. First, you scan the community to find those recurring problems. Then, you analyze them to figure out what's really causing them. Only then do you craft a specific response. And, this is the key part, you have to assess if your response actually worked. It creates this constant feedback loop so you can keep getting better.
So a really powerful version of this is a strategy known as pulling levers policing. And the name says it all. The idea isn't to flood a whole neighborhood with cops. Instead, it's super focused. You concentrate on the small group of repeat violent offenders who are causing most of the problems, and you use every tool you have, every lever at your disposal to send a crystal clear message that the violence has to stop.
And if you want to see if this stuff actually works, just look at Boston's Operation Ceasefire. By zeroing in on key gang members and pulling every lever they had, the city saw a jaw-dropping 63% drop in monthly youth homicides. It's a really powerful example of what this kind of focused, strategic policing can do.
Okay, so with all that in mind, where do we go from here? What's the future look like on the force when it comes to balancing the need for justice with the best interests of young people?
Well, a lot of experts, including the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, have basically drawn a map. It's all about emphasizing what they call procedural justice, which just means making sure interactions are fair and respectful. It's about increasing transparency with things like body cameras and really doubling down on building trust through community partnerships. The big takeaway is that the focus is shifting from just what police do to how they do it.
And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. We've talked about the laws, the discretion, the data, the strategies, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to this one fundamental question. How do we, as a society, make sure that every single officer, in that tense moment on a street corner, makes a judgment call that perfectly balances the letter of the law with the best interests of a child? That right there, that is the ultimate challenge.